Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Media Brands Learning and Development here. And we are joined by the lab team for another awesome webinar. We're so excited for today's content, Outlook 2018. A couple of quick reminders. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted onto Flight Learning for on-demand viewing in about 1 to 2 weeks time. So if you miss anything or if you know someone who wasn't able to join, just let them know that it will be posted on Flight Learning in about a week or two. We will save some time at the end of the webinar to take some of your questions, but as we go, please feel free to send in your questions through either your chat box or the questions box so that we can make sure to get those answered. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the lab team. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Hey, everyone. This is Adam Simon. I'm the head of strategy for the lab. Every year, we put out an outlook that is focused on the trends that we see shaping the technology and media landscape over the next few years, and also consumer behavior emerging out of those changes. And this year, our theme is, our overarching theme is the end of the beginning. But before I dive into that, just a quick backgrounder in case you're not familiar with the lab. We are the Media Futures Agency inside of IPG. So we work with you guys at your sister agencies to make sure that you're helping your clients navigate navigate to where the puck is going, the direction that media and technology is evolving into the future. We have a partnerships team that meets with over 300 startups every year. So if you are looking to integrate some startups and innovation into your planning, we can help with that. We've already probably vetted most of the people that are on your list. And if not, we're certainly happy to meet with them for you and render an opinion. And of course, we're very invested in thought leadership and perspective and proactive guidance on what we see is happening in the industry, which is what this and most of the webinars that we do are focused on. So with that, I'm going to jump into the end of the beginning. Last year, we were focusing on the next wave of computing and the moves that the major technology platform players are sort of making right now to best position themselves as consumers start looking beyond the smartphone to things like connected speakers, and wearable devices and new media technologies like artificial intelligence. And this year, we're ready to say that we're really at the end of the beginning phase of the internet. And what that means is that a lot of the dynamics are starting to change. We're used to thinking about and talking about tech as its own industry. But at this point, our four major tech platforms, meaning Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, are really driving the entire global economy. We're used to talking about sales from Amazon or traffic from Facebook and Google as being additive. But additive to traditional commerce sales, offline sales, or other traffic to publishers. But at this point, they're really defining every industry that they touch. And if they don't touch your industry or your client's industry yet, just give it a couple weeks and they probably will. The changes that these guys make in their platforms are really bellwethers. They move the stock market. They move the stock prices of thousands of companies that are riding in their wake. And it's important to note that this actually doesn't have anything to do directly with the technology itself. It has to do with consumer behavior and how consumers are using these platforms. And I think there are two things that happened in the past year that really embody this shift to a more mature phase of technological disruption. The first one, which I don't think would come as a surprise to anybody on this call, is Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods. It's their first serious foray into brick and mortar, and it's a tech company making a major non-tech acquisition. This is not just about brick and mortar. It's just not just about adding more customers to Amazon's bottom line. It's really about giving them a way to scale grocery instantly. Overnight, Amazon ended up with hundreds of distribution points and millions of new customers for their grocery services. Because unlike books and electronics, fresh food and groceries really require scale to make them work. And this is going to enable Amazon to start innovating on top of the existing grocery models. I think it's interesting to note that Amazon and Whole Foods combined only represent about 1.5% of the US grocery industry. But I think I think everybody here intrinsically knows that they are really the ones driving the conversation. Pretty much every grocer was forced to respond immediately in the wake, lots of them by partnering, some of them through acquisitions. But this trend of seeing a relatively small, in terms of dollar amounts, company making, really driving the industry is something that we're seeing across the board. The other major thing that happened last year that is really changing, indication of change, is Disney's acquisition of Fox, which is consolidating the two largest studios and IP holders in Hollywood. This is an awesome example of a legacy brand in Disney responding to a shifting market and ensuring their place in the new economy. This is definitely 100% a defensive move against Netflix. Again, Netflix is smaller. They're tiny compared to the size of Disney, but they fund more TV series than anybody else. And they are, again, driving the thought leadership in the industry. They also stole Shonda Rhimes away from Disney, who was always a crown jewel in Disney's TV empire. They stole her away from Disney in 2017 as well. Which I think is just indicative of how important Netflix is, despite the massive difference in scale. I think this is a brilliant move on Disney's part, and will help them not just thrive, not just survive, but also thrive in the future, and really positions them to potentially join Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon as a major pillar of the economy going forward. So all that said, that's in introduction. Every year we break down our overall topic into a few different trends, and we have 4 this year that we're going to go through. Yeah, so here are the 4 trends that we're going to walk through today. The first one is all culture is digital culture. And the first implication of this sort of more mature cultural shift in the internet is that there really is no distinction between online and offline. All of our culture and all of our activity is intrinsically digital. One thing that didn't happen in 2017, but that was clearly a shadow over the entire year, was the 2016 election and the ways that social media was used both normally and possibly illicitly to affect the 2016 presidential election. In retrospect, we really should have seen this coming. Social media has been disrupting how we consume, produce, and distribute news. So it was pretty obvious that that was going to start to change how our elections work at some point. And I think this really underscores the difference that there's no separation between the internet and real life. It's all one thing, and meaning and action flow pretty seamlessly between them. We're seeing similar moves in entertainment. The moves towards streaming really means that all assumptions are starting to be up for grabs. Amplified TV is something we've been talking about for a while. The fact that the delivery mechanism, whether something's coming over your cable or broadcast or over the internet, that actually matters a little bit less than how it changes consumer behavior around television when it comes to things like content discovery, expectations about ad load, and it's enabling new kinds of brand experiences. This year, we think that windowing is about to become part of the conversation. I think a great example that just happened this week is the Cloverfield paradox, which went from being announced publicly in a Super Bowl commercial to being live on Netflix within an hour or so, or a couple of hours at most. This movie, by all accounts, is not a good movie. All the reviews are terrible, but they got a ton more viewers for it because it literally gave you an answer to the question, what am I going to watch after the Super Bowl? I think that was it was definitely a stunt on Netflix's part, and really a show of strength, I think, on their part in terms of being able to drive viewership to their platform. But that's just one recent example that I threw in there this week. Meanwhile, in terms of windowing and the theatrical experience, we're seeing MoviePass and theaters like Alamo Drafthouse and iPix really redefining the low end on one side with MoviePass and the high end on the other side with companies like Alamo of the movie-going experience. And one thing that I think is important to note, there's a lot of questions about MoviePass's economic viability. Can this company survive in the long run? It actually doesn't matter for our purposes, unless you're looking to invest in MoviePass. MoviePass has permanently shifted consumer expectations around pricing and experience of going to the theater. And that's not something that's going to go away, even if MoviePass is acquired or put out of business or runs out of money. We also think that the theatrical window is likely to break in 2018. This will be the ones to do it, offering a premium video on demand window that would allow you to rent a movie 2 weeks after it opens in theaters for about $30. That seems like a logical compromise that is coming to bear. And once that window is broken, I think it really throws all other content distribution windows for video into the mix. Anything might be possible. And that's really, sort of the big takeaway here is that once one of these expectations changes, all of the other ones are sort of up for grabs. We've been talking for a long time about sports as the linchpin of the cable bundle and the thing that's holding consumers to cable television. Just last night, Disney announced the launch of their ESPN subscription service. It's a pretty weak offering by all accounts, but right now we really see that as a placeholder, as a place for them to start putting more sports as they can line up those deals as they expire. It's really a way for them to get consumers to start paying ESPN directly and giving them a place to put those additional sports and additional games as they secure the rights to them over the next 5 years, because it is going to take at least 5 years for sports to start to transition over. Meanwhile, traditional sports, like ESPN is mostly invested in, are really under generational attack. Younger millennials across the board are looking more towards esports or professional video gaming more often than traditional sports. This is exactly the kind of thing that most analysts could never imagine, and that it's really hard for people to wrap their head around. The fact that people might want to watch professional League of Legends players instead of professional football players. But it is something that we're seeing in our statistics, that millennials at least favor equally esports to traditional sports. This is, again, trying to reset some expectations. A lot of things that we've come to accept as accepted truths, such as people watch traditional kinds of sports, are starting to change as the internet and digital distribution becomes inherent to our culture. And new kinds of content like esports also means new channels. The predominant channel for esports is not ESPN or Turner, even though they do carry esports to some extent, but it's actually Twitch, which is an Amazon-owned company. Twitch has been around for a while. They do very well with younger millennial men especially. And Twitch is making some interesting moves. Disney actually just announced that they will be trialing non-esports content on Twitch this year with some of their YouTube stars. There's been a growing sentiment among popular YouTube creators that they're pretty unhappy with some moves Google has been making with YouTube, which is opening up a possibility here for Twitch to make some plays for that content. So it's super, I think, important that Disney is trialing on Twitch, and we'll see how that plays out. But if it works for them, I think we can expect to see Twitch start to emerge as more of a, not just for esports, but as more of a general YouTube competitor. Twitch has a lot of opportunities for brands. We at the lab have a good relationship with them. We've been working with them and talking to them for a while. This is just one example of how you can activate on Twitch. Old Spice partnered with Twitch to live stream a custom game called Squid, where consumers were invited to guide the squid through various rites of passage, like working at a pizzeria, learning to drive, or learning to play the drums. And it's just one example. Twitch actually has some even deeper and more interactive ways for brands to engage than we have seen on YouTube in the past. So this move to Twitch, if we do see significant audience growth there, could be very good for us as brand marketers. We can't talk about digital culture without mentioning VR, but in large part, the talk about VR has surpassed actual consumer adoption. You can see that number on the screen. Only 8 million premium VR headsets in market, something around 30 million of the sort of headsets where you pop your phone in to use them, but those are much less used even than the premium headsets. We really see 2018 as a make or break year for VR. The cost of entry is going to come down, and so we'll sort of see how many consumers by the end of the year have adopted or have access to VR in their home to see really how big that market is going to be. Meanwhile, augmented reality is seeing major investment from all of our major tech platforms. We really think that augmented reality is the bigger opportunity for the future, and luckily that's something that we can start working with today on mobile. Great example of this is the IKEA Place app, which was a launch partner for Apple's augmented reality platform on iOS 11. It lets you look at furniture in your house and sizes it automatically to the correct size of the room. That understanding of the room is really the big thing that has changed in the past few years. We've had AR for a while on our phones. Really now the thing that's changed is without a lot of work on the developer side, they can drop some code in that allows the phone to understand the size and shape of the room so that the furniture is the correct size. At the end of the day, though, mobile augmented reality is really just a preview. All of the major technology platforms are working on wearable augmented reality glasses. Mobile AR is about building an army of developers and figuring out use cases. So these wearable AR glasses are something that are still a couple of years away, and would basically mean we're completely subsuming the physical world into the digital world because there would be a digital overlay on everything you saw. That's still a couple of years away, but it has the potential to be the next big platform shift after mobile. So that's why we're recommending that brands start to think about use cases and ways to engage with consumers using AR on mobile today, relatively easy and accessible, and lets you start figuring out what your AR relationship to a consumer might be in the future. So that's our first trend. On to our second trend, which is about the two paths ahead that we see for retail. How we shop is undergoing a big transformation, and brands are increasingly going to have to choose between one of two directions to take in order to engage with consumers, whether this is online or offline. We are going to see a lot more brick and mortar retail closures this year. It's easy to blame e-commerce or Amazon in specific, but that's actually not the case. There's lots of complicated financial things that are happening in the U.S. retail market that are causing stores to close. It's had a lot to do with overexpansion and overconfidence in the market on the retailer's part. Only about 10% of our retail dollars are actually spent online today. But just like we're saying sort of across the board, the market leaders really aren't about the dollar amount. It's really about who's driving thought leadership and who's driving change within the industry. And I think it's no surprise to anybody that in retail, that's really Amazon. At this point, 82% of high-income households are Amazon Prime members. And that number is overall, for all U.S. households, is above 50%. It's between 50 and 70% of all U.S. households are Prime. Amazon which means that they're most likely shopping with Amazon at least a couple of times a month. Amazon is really changing consumer expectations around pricing and convenience and customer service, and pretty soon, the brick and mortar retail experience as well, as they start to integrate Whole Foods and other Amazon brick and mortar retail into the Amazon ethos. This is going to impact, what Amazon is doing is going to impact every category of retail. For every category that we shop in, even things we wouldn't traditionally consider quote unquote retail, like ticket sales. Amazon, what they're doing is going to impact everything sort of across every category, even if they're not competing in that category, just because they're really driving change in consumer expectations. And there's really two strategies to approach from a brand and retailer side. The first one is differentiation. Differentiation can include things like tactics like exclusive products, superior curation of products, or differentiating on the shopping experience itself. This is where we see retailers experimenting a lot with technology. Technology certainly can be used to differentiate your shopping experience, but it doesn't have to be technology-led. I said this before at the top, but all of these things are really driven around consumer behavior that might originate with technology, but that doesn't mean technology is always the answer. A great example is Bonobos. Bonobos, which was acquired by Walmart last year, they differentiate around shopping as an experience. They're really bringing high-end, high-touch customer service shopping experience to something that is more like a mid-range product in terms of clothing. It's in the price range of like J. Crew and Banana Republic, but you're getting Prada-level service when you walk in those stores. Obviously, Bonobos being a boutique clothing retailer, they're also only selling their own products, so the exclusive products are also a great way to get people in the stores. You can only buy Bonobos clothes on bonobos.com and from their own retail stores. Isn't selling their own products is Barney's. Barney's in New York does an awesome holiday collaboration every year with a culture-focused brand. Collaborations are a great way to differentiate and also to drive awareness among new kinds, different audiences that might not be a natural fit. This is an example from a few years ago that is with Disney, but they've also done collaborations with Lady Gaga and Baz Luhrmann. I actually don't know who they did this past year, but there's always a major cultural person or brand that they work with. They do have exclusive products that are created for these collaborations, but really it's the crossover, cross-pollination of audience that really is what they're looking for and what drives people into a Barney's to shop for these, to see these collaborations, to see how they've designed the stores. And then while you're in Barney's, you might also buy something that is more of a commodity. You can also buy down the street at a Nordstrom. But because you're already in Barney's, you're more likely to shop there. And just creating a new kind of shopping experience was recently taken to an extreme with Alexander Wang's recent collaboration with Adidas. Obviously, again, this is exclusive products. It was only purchasable via this out-of-home signage, which was up in New York City for a single day. So the only way to get these items was to find these out-of-home posters and text to the number, the special code for each item, and you would then arrange to have a courier deliver it to you. The other strategy that brands and retailers can use to reach customers is convenience. Convenience can really be focused around things like product discovery or fulfillment or other purchase methods. Things like on-demand, companies like Postmates can really be dropped into existing commerce solutions to enhance convenience, even in a way that passes through the cost of that convenience to consumers. We've seen that consumers in a lot of instances are willing to pay for convenience. It's not price is not necessarily a barrier to entry as long as that price is somewhat reasonable. Another example is pre-ordering, which we've seen with a lot of food brands and a lot of QSRs. Starbucks has been so successful with their pre-order program that they're actually being forced to redesign certain stores because more people are using pre-order than are actually walking up to place an order with the cashier, which kind of breaks down the organization of how a Starbucks store is run. And another example is Kiehl's. Kiehl's has only sells through their own stores for the most part, but they've actually, and their website is not the best necessarily, but they've enhanced convenience by allowing you to text to order or text to reorder specific products. So being able to, while you're just in your bathroom, fire off a quick text because you realize you're running out of something definitely enhances the convenience. Obviously, that's all using stored customer information for fulfillment and payment, but really making it as easy as sending a few words to Kiehl's via text message to reorder products. Amazon Go. Amazon is obviously sort of at the height of convenience and really pushing what it means to be convenient for shoppers forward. Everyone I'm sure has heard about Amazon Go. It's their checkout list store which I like to say is shoplifting as a business model. You walk in, you grab what you want, and you walk out, and you never have to, there's no self-checkout, there's no manual checkout. this is really sort of the height of convenience, and it's no surprise that Amazon Go is actually the technology powering it is first being deployed in something that would probably best be described as a convenience store. Again, Amazon is really sort of pushing here and resetting consumer expectations around convenience. As these Amazon Go stores or this technology starts to roll out into more and more stores, it's going to be more and more difficult to justify more elaborate checkout schemes to consumers once more people have actually had the experience of walking in and walking out without actually checking out. Trying to differentiate on price or convenience is itself, those are things that it seems like you can combine these two strategies. You can use differentiation, but differentiating on convenience or on price. That's definitely possible, but in our minds, it's a short-term strategy. On the convenience side, you're almost certainly likely to be undercut by Amazon at some point because they do prioritize that so much and have more resources than most retailers have in order to deploy new technologies to make it possible. But whether convenience or price, it can be a successful short-term strategy to differentiate in these ways. If there is a plan to migrate those customers that you've acquired to something more differentiated and more defensible in the long run. We just don't think that convenience and price are super defensible for most brands. At the end of the day, the strongest brands, only the strongest brands will really be able to differentiate against aggregators like Amazon and Walmart in retail, Expedia and Kayak in travel, Ticketmaster in events. We're seeing these giant aggregators really hold that consumer relationship, and you're going to need a really differentiated brand and a differentiated product to attract customers outside of those aggregators. This is a little bit different than it was. This has always been the case for a lot of CPG brands and other consumer products, but this is different than before because there are actually fewer and fewer of these aggregators and these gatekeepers that we have to work through. So it's harder and harder to play them off each other. I know that from working with a lot of CPG brands, trying to keep Amazon and Walmart both happy at the same time is pretty difficult. So it's going to be an ongoing challenge. Importantly, the channel that we use to shop also shapes what is bought. We basically now have unlimited shelf space and AI-powered personalized recommendations, and those don't function the same as eye-level displays and end caps. Voice shopping in particular, which is something that obviously Amazon is really driving, looks more like SEO and doesn't look anything at all like a planogram for a big box retail store. So as consumer behavior changes, we already have seen 20% of consumers having made a purchase via voice shopping, and another 33% say they plan to make a purchase via voice shopping. We've depending on the projections you believe, between 30 and 50% of shopping searches, product searches, will happen via voice in the next couple of years, and this is really going to affect the kinds of products that are purchased. We also see visual search as emerging as a new form of product discovery. Again, these don't work the same as our old form of merchandising. This probably, together, these two things probably mean fewer brands and fewer products from each brand. We don't need to have a house of brands with multiple SKUs inside of each brand when our AI hurt us rather than help us like it used to in big box retail stores. So probably fewer brands and fewer SKUs within each brand, and more focused promotion on those brands. The advantage of slimming down your brands is you can spend your dollars promoting, spend more money promoting each of those more focused brands. Nike is someone who is pursuing this strategy. They have been speaking publicly about how they're dramatically reducing their SKUs and consolidating their products into only the best performing retailers that they work with. So that said, on to our third trend, which is the battle for the home. After many years of treading water, the smart home is finally starting to emerge from its flip phone-esque adolescence and full of incompatible standards and weird app controls. The connected home used to just be something for nerds like us in the lab, and now it's something that more and more mainstream consumers are embracing. That's largely being driven by the adoption of smart speakers and voice assistants. Again, Amazon is a driving force here in the market with Alexa, but also Google. Apple's HomePod comes out this Friday. So again, most of our major technology platforms are in this race. Most people start out buying using their smart speakers for music and weather and news, but after that low-hanging fruit, controlling connected devices in the home is actually pretty high up there as well. Obviously, not everyone has those devices, but they do buy them pretty quickly after they get their smart speakers. And this has really given our major platform players a new beachhead into the home, which is starting to ignite a new platform war. And like I said, Amazon, Google, and Apple are all in the home, in market already with speaker products that they are trying to grow their footprint in the home. I think it's important to note that voice is not the only entry point to the home. A lot of media sort of takes the entire home platform as the smart speaker market, but that I think is pretty short-sighted. Obviously, Amazon would like you to think that because of their market share, but I don't think that's true. TV is also, I think, an important component of the home platform, and we've seen Amazon and Google both launch connected speakers with screens, but in time, I think the TV will probably take over a lot of the jobs that those things do, because everybody already has a TV and everybody already has it connected to the internet so that they can stream TV. TBD there. The battle is breaking out in all different kinds of rooms of the house, though. The kitchen has been a battleground for connected devices for a while, with refrigerators, microwaves, stoves, coffee pots, things like that. At CES this year, we actually saw a lot of connected bathroom devices for the first time, attacking the bathroom with an entire ecosystem of products. I think that it's easy to get distracted by the plethora of connected products. There's probably a connected version of anything that possibly could connect to electricity in your house, probably has a connected version that is available for purchase somewhere. But at the end of the day, the platforms that connect these things to each other and that allow us to control them are going to have a larger impact on consumer adoption and behavior than any individual product. This is a Samsung refrigerator with a screen on it that they call Family Hub. Samsung has been selling connected refrigerators for more than 4 years now, but I bet you, I would be very surprised if anybody on the call has actually seen one in person, even though they've been in market for a while now. The average replacement cycle for a refrigerator is 13 years. So it's going to take a long time for everything in our houses to come online. One day, just like now you can't buy a TV that's not connected, that doesn't have smart TV features built into it, one day that will probably be true for refrigerators as well, but that's probably still a long ways away. And even if that were true today, no one's rushing out to upgrade their refrigerator. So these individual endpoints take a really long time to turn over. But that said, these platforms are really the important part for us. And today, each platform really has its own advantages and weaknesses. Amazon with Alexa has about 70% market share of smart speakers, and they've also done a great job of getting Alexa-enabled microphones embedded in other appliances like refrigerators and ovens. Alexa right now, for a lot of consumers, is synonymous with voice control in the home, and I think they're doing a good job of holding on to that perception. Google obviously has great brand recognition. Google is the one that everybody sort of expects would be the natural winner in this space because they can offer best-in-class artificial intelligence for responding to your inquiries, as well as access to all of Google's knowledge graph, as well as YouTube and Android's access to Android users' personal data from their phones. Apple supports a wide range of devices with their home platform and has probably the best non-voice interface for controlling them. I think an underappreciated component of Apple's ecosystem, which might have some impact in the home, is the Apple Watch. The watch is one of the announcements we saw at CES this year was Whirlpool announced Apple Watch support for all of their appliances. Your watch is going to be great if all you want to do is understand when your laundry is going to be done. That actually might be better to be something that you look at on your watch than that you shout across the room to Alexa to ask. And importantly, the watch can also help your home understand who is home and who might be in which room. Apple's platform is actually really well designed for presence, which is something that I think as more parts of our home get connected, you might want to know, you might want to trigger different automations based on who's in which room or who's sitting down to watch television, for example. Again, Apple's connected smart speaker, the HomePod, comes out this Friday. We will definitely have more of an opinion on that after we get our hands on it. Notably, Amazon, Apple, and Google all also have TV platforms, which are ready to be integrated into the larger home platform at some point. They're not very well integrated yet. What is brewing is a little bit of ecosystem lock-in. Exclusives in music and television might start to tilt your household towards one platform or another. If Apple has a really great TV show that you want to watch, then you might have to get an Apple TV, which might influence your choices for other products within your home. At least that's what a lot of these companies are hoping that those deals might do. The connected home really creates these new choke points for media. Amazon really is being aggressive in this area because they want to own those choke points. Amazon doesn't have their own smartphone platform, which sort of keeps them a little bit further away from the consumer than they would like in the mobile era. But when they're looking towards the home, they're looking to own and control more of the ways that you access media so that they can influence your purchase decisions and guide them to their own channels. You'll notice if you look at this graphic, there is one box on this slide, one connected TV box, that is independent currently. And there's also one of our major tech platforms that I haven't mentioned in this section and is still missing from this picture, and that is Facebook and Roku. At CES, we did hear rumors that Facebook was interested in acquiring Roku. And I think that that would be a really good fit considering that, again, Roku has a large connected TV platform. They also announced at CES a connected speaker platform that they would be producing a platform for other speaker makers to embed into their hardware, as well as a voice assistant. And normally we would dismiss a Roku voice assistant as never being able to compete with Apple and Google and Amazon. But certainly if Roku were acquired by Facebook, Facebook certainly has the engineers to throw at that problem and make into a great product. Facebook had also been rumored to be working on their own assistant and smart speaker, which hasn't seen the light of day yet. Roku also has a profitable ad platform, as some of you may know. So this seems like a great deal. It would certainly make all of the matrices line up very nicely, and would really give Facebook an entry into the home that they currently don't have, and might be honestly challenging for them coming under the Facebook brand. They might not have the consumer trust that they need to get into the home otherwise. So this is something we're watching for this year. We'll see if it happens, but wanted to keep you guys updated on that. Strategically, I think this would be very sound. Notably, I think it's important to remember that a home, or to think about that a home might not have, might actually use multiple assistants. Unlike a smartphone, where you're really only going to carry one phone with you, there's nothing to stop you from having multiple assistants scattered throughout your home. You might use Alexa for shopping, but you might use Siri or Google Assistant to send text messages and check your calendar. And there's, especially with the lower cost devices we're seeing from Amazon and Google, there's nothing to prevent you from trying multiple assistants very easily. Almost more importantly than that, though, is that these platforms don't have the same network effects that come from, that happen with things like smartphones and social networks. What I use in my home has no effects and no bearing on what my neighbors use, or even really what my family members, across the country use. That's kind of why you're seeing communications platforms being baked into these platforms. That's why Amazon has launched their own video calling service, because they want to create network effects. They want to have an Alexa communication channel that makes sure that when your parents are using the same assistant as you are using. We'll see if that actually takes off. Thus far, video calling or calling in general is not a really prime use case that a lot of consumers are using these devices for. So that's our thoughts on the home. And now on to our last trend, which is talking about brand trust being the key to consumer access. I mentioned a minute ago that Facebook might not have the trust of consumers to get into the home. I think that actually segues pretty nicely into what we're seeing across the board. The market in general is extending into our homes and our bodies. And only a few select brands, only the brands that we trust the most are really going to get access to that arena. For example, we've been selling health and fitness products. We've been selling health and fitness as products for decades now, right? But now they're starting to become hyper-personalized based on things like DNA tests. We just yesterday spoke with a startup called Helix that handles all of the science and regulatory issues around DNA testing and lets you build products on top of customer sequence DNA. And from there, we can start to buy better sleep. We can buy the perfect romantic partner. We can even buy a better death. End-of-life planning is starting to become a trend-driven industry. We're really getting to the point where there's a purchasable solution for every problem that is often powered by artificial intelligence and might know us better than we know ourselves. So as this starts to happen, as the market starts to extend to our homes and our bodies, only a few brands are going to get access to that data. We talked about the home platform, but one thing that Amazon announced last year that was not really directly tied into the rest of that platform is Amazon Key, which actually gives Amazon physical access to your home. This is something that people tend to react with shock to when they first hear about it. I'm sure you guys probably have all heard of this already before. When we talk with clients about it, they tend to gasp. In polling, it showed that that around 90% of people were horrified or at least slightly scared of the idea of giving Amazon access to their homes when they weren't there. But 10% were very excited about the possibility of this. In a recent survey from The Verge, it indicated that Amazon was actually the most trusted of the major technology companies, and was about as people trusted Amazon about as much as they trusted their bank, which isn't an interesting comparison because I'm not sure how many people trust their banks these days, but it was certainly higher than all of the other major tech companies. This kind of physical access to your home is obviously requires a great deal of trust. But it is the kind of thing that Amazon, of anybody, does possess right now. Trust, though, is extending beyond just products and services to values. Things like environmental stability, environmental protections, workplace equality, and even what political parties the management of a company supports. We're seeing, as politics gets more and more divisive, we're seeing consumers ask brands to take a stand more and more often. This is one example. Patagonia blacked out their website on the day that Trump signed an executive order that reduced the size of 2 national parks. This was probably pretty low risk for them given their audience, but it was still a very strong political statement. Another example, Lego got called out for supporting for advertising in right-wing British newspapers around when Brexit was happening, and was forced to pull their ads. And this is a Diesel ad campaign that riffed on the concept of Trump's border wall. Another brand trust issue that might start to surface as more of our discovery becomes driven by AI-powered recommendations is, do consumers trust the algorithms behind those recommendations? Netflix and Hulu and Amazon are obvious examples as they start to populate their landing pages with data-driven recommendations which are personalized to each user. The question is, how much do you trust that that algorithm has your best interests in mind? The unbundling of online discovery goes even beyond that, though. Another example, Snapchat's new context cards feature pulls in additional information about real-world places into the app when posts on Snapchat are geotagged, which saves you the need to go outside the app, but then raises the question of how much do you trust Snapchat's information and Snapchat's ranking of these particular locations. This is going to become even more important as we start to use augmented reality, as that starts to become more widely adopted. because the algorithms that are powering this, how much do you trust them? Do you trust Yelp? Do you trust Yelp reviews of restaurants when you're walking down the street wearing augmented reality glasses, or do you maybe want a little bit more context about that, knowing what we know about Yelp and their reviews platform? In this era of fake news, brands are really going to need to establish rock solid credibility to earn a consumer's trust. For brands that can establish that trust, it becomes a big differentiator for them that allows them to start expanding their business into new areas and to get even closer to the consumer. At CES, there were a bunch of Alexa-enabled ovens and microwaves that were launched, where the temperature and time is set when you just say, Alexa, I'm cooking some roast chicken. But for the most part, that temperature and time, the actual cooking of your food is being defined by the manufacturers. Amazon's not actually doing that themselves. They're leaving it up to the manufacturer to define how to handle specific recipes. But if you think about it, most people would not trust the manufacturer of their oven to plan their meals and to understand how to cook the food that they're putting in it themselves. They haven't built up that consumer trust when it comes to actual meal preparation. Which is why Whirlpool actually last year acquired the recipe site Yumly. Yumly does have a lot of trust in the kitchen, and so now so does Whirlpool by proxy. We will trust Whirlpool's recipes and integration more because they're using trusted recipes from Yumly. An example of a brand really extending their core value proposition is a Disney example. Disney launched this Circle with Disney device, which is a Wi-Fi device that basically it's parental controls for your Wi-Fi. It manages access to specific sites. It works across devices, so across any laptops and desktops, but also mobile devices that you might hand out to your kids around the house. It's really leveraging the Disney brand to enter the home in an interesting way. Parents intrinsically trust Disney. A lot of parents intrinsically trust Disney. And this is the kind of device that would be a hard sell for a lot of people to install on their Wi-Fi network. Something that's actually seeing all of the traffic going over your network might be a hard sell for some people, but here is where the Disney brand is really lending their credibility to this product. And of course, it's an interesting strategic move for Disney to get into the home. And one more example of that brand trust. Just a couple weeks ago, Virgin launched a cruise line, or announced a cruise line, which is launching in 2020, and with basically no details about what it's going to be or how it's going to work. Customers are already putting down deposits to secure their place in line because they know the brand, they know what kind of experience it stands for. They already know a lot of people. This is interesting timing because a lot of travelers miss Virgin America just as it got folded into Alaska Airlines. They're really leaning on that leverage and that knowledge that the consumer has of the brand to line up a bunch of pre-orders for something that basically doesn't exist yet. Ultimately, this trust is a calculation of risk and reward. Today, a lot of the companies, the brands that are closest to consumers are technology platforms, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. But that closeness is not assumed, and it is potentially under threat. One of the things that we're watching this year is the possible shadow of government regulation of big tech companies. Amazon and Facebook are facing, mounting regulatory pressures, but like I said, Amazon is actually one of the most beloved consumer technology companies. So it's unlikely that it might not be likely. They might be saved from actual government regulation by the fact that so many consumers actually trust them and find them valuable in their lives. These are just a few things that we are seeing, that we are watching in 2018 that could significantly alter the course of the year and the future, how these trends play out. I won't run through all of them. That first one obviously is the one I just mentioned. But these are the things that we're watching at the lab that we think could happen or might play out, and that might significantly impact the course of the year. And with that, I'll just leave this slide up here so you guys can read through these, and I think that's a great time to take some questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple of minutes for questions here, so please get those in either through your chat box or your questions box. And while you guys are doing that, we do have a couple that came in as we were listening. First one, and this looks like it was from a little earlier on in the presentation, what does windowing mean?
Oh, so windowing is how you choose to distribute content. So for example, in the film industry, traditionally you have a theatrical window where it's in movie theaters. Then it will move to there's actually a weird window, I'm not exactly sure what they usually call it, where it's like on airplanes, that's its own window. Then there's the premium cable window when it's on like HBO, for example, and then it would move to broadcast. And around the same time, sometime in between premium and broadcast is when it would come out on home video. There used to only be like 3 or 4 windows, and now there's like more like 7, but because of things like Netflix. But Netflix actually, for most content, gets put in the syndication window. So like traditionally is at the tail end of distribution for existing content providers. The windowing as a concept is just, when do I take the content and move it into a less profitable distribution channel in order to get a larger audience? That's usually the strategy. Less profit, larger audience.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Next up, is there a way for retailers to do both convenience and differentiation, or do they have to choose and prioritize one?
I think it's certainly possible, but it's difficult. If you can make differentiation work, definitely do that, because you're going to have the most connection to the consumer. And then I think you can work on convenience as sort of a side effect of that differentiation. Certainly things like on-demand e-commerce is something that anybody can drop into an existing platform and make work. But I think it's more, which is your priority, rather than choosing one exclusively.
Okay, next up. How do you see the role of media agencies in this changing landscape, and how can we help clients and monetize that on the way?
Yeah, we've been we've been talking a lot about this over the past few days. A lot of what's happening on the agency side, and I'm sure that I don't want to speak for upper management, but I know that a lot of what they're talking about is how we can be more like consultants and less like just straight up media buying, because what our clients need is a lot of help navigating this changing landscape. And media and technology is just sort of one component. I'm sure we've all walked into the room or gotten a brief where some client has asked us for a media solution to a problem that was a product problem or an industry problem. And that's always a little challenging. And I think what we're trying to do in general is shift our positioning a little bit so we can help them understand and navigate the entire course of bringing their products to market. I know that's vague, but I think everybody in the industry is still trying to figure that out, honestly. But I think it is less about straight up media buying and more about helping them bring products to market.
Okay. What are some of the respective weaknesses of the 3 home platform owners?
Weaknesses. Apple's weakness is that they don't have microphones embedded everywhere. Amazon and Google are both working with third parties to get microphones embedded into their refrigerators, for example. It's very, I think the microwave is a great example of, I was saying turnover doesn't happen that often. Microwaves probably have the highest turnover of any consumer appliance. And I think probably a year from now, a lot of them will have Alexa or Google built into them. So Apple's at a disadvantage there. Google is bad at selling products in general. They're doing fine. I think they're selling their speaker devices, but they're not as aggressive as Amazon, and they don't quite have the distribution that Amazon has, and it seems like a problem that should be easy to solve. But Google has shown time and again that they can steal defeats out of the jaws of victory. So I think that's one challenge that's potentially there for them. I also think that Google tends to overfixate on search, and right now search is a common use case for these devices, but over time we're really going to want them to evolve into something that's more proactive and that understands us and takes action on that data faster. And then Amazon, I think, is sort of the reverse of Google, is that they're always going to be fixated on shopping. And Amazon doesn't have access to our personal data like Google and Apple do. If you're an iPhone user or an Android user, Apple or Google, respectively, can pull all kinds of super personal data and information on your phone to eventually become more of a proactive, actual assistant, not just a voice interface to search. Amazon doesn't have that access right now, and it's unclear how they would get there without, Alexa basically has to be so good that you connect every source of data to the Alexa apps that it has access to all that information.
We have time for one more question. How can a brand earn consumer trust if they don't even have a direct relationship with customers anymore with the aggregators in the middle?
Yeah, I think one thing that it depends on what you need to reach the consumer. Not every brand needs to have that consumer trust, and not every brand will. In a lot of cases, using those aggregators as a proxy for trust will be good enough. That might be the case for a lot of CPG brands, for example. As long as you have a good relationship with Amazon and Amazon has a good relationship with the consumer, you're going to be okay. Now, I know that's an uncomfortable position for a lot of brands to be in, but that has traditionally been true for a lot of brands who only sell through third parties. The other option is to try to go direct to consumer and to establish that trust. And that's something that I think a lot of brands that have never gone direct to consumer are afraid of, but it is definitely a way to guarantee having more control over your own destiny in the future. It doesn't have to be the product, it doesn't have to be the flagship product. We've seen a lot of brands launch secondary brands that are actually focused direct to consumer. And I think that's an interesting strategy to take, where you're not really burning your bridges, but you're seeing if you can actually create that direct connection to the consumer, and if you can actually generate that differentiation and that consumer trust. I hope that makes sense.
All right. Well, we are out of time for today's session, but if they do have any more questions, and there were a couple that came in last minute, you see the contact information on the screen right now. You can go ahead and get those over via email. So thank you so much for everyone who submitted questions, and thank you all so much for joining us today. And of course, thank you to the lab team.
And there is a written version of the Outlook on our Medium blog. Also, definitely subscribe to our newsletter and listen to our new podcast, Floor 9. You can get links to all that stuff at ipglab.com.
Yeah, so be sure to visit that website, get access to all that great stuff. Remember, if you missed any part of this webinar, it will be posted on Flight Learning. The recording will be posted in about a week or two, so just give us a little bit of time there, and be sure to spread the word to any colleagues that may have missed it. But thanks so much again, you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.